good, I'm going to say timeline. And welcome to Richard and Karl presents Deep Space and Dragons. I'm one of your hosts, possibly in the top two, Richard.
I am also probably in the top two hosts of this podcast, Karl, with a K. Don't spell it with a C, because that's not me.
Excellent.
I don't know who this other Karl guy is, but
I think
he
has like a chain of burger restaurants. So, let's start this off with what's new in the Karl with the K-verse.
Well, I mean, not a whole lot. I mean, I just kind of deal with regular customers, customers that just don't listen. It's like, oh yeah, is this for pickup or delivery? I'll get a pepperoni pizza. Okay, is this for pickup or delivery? The second one will be a cheese pizza. You're not listening to me, dude. I mean, you can't be so like blunt with customers, but it's sometimes customer service industry.
You can't be so blunt with customers.
I mean, okay, you're right. I could just talk to them however I want, but then they wouldn't be happy.
I don't know. Back when I worked at Redacted Movie Theater, and it was my last day after I called the labor board on Redacted Incident, and I already knew my job was on the Redacted out the door, a customer told me that they were like, I need to speak to a manager, this and that, the full speech. And then, in a fit of a beautiful combination of apathy and sarcasm, I told them the honest truth, that if they were to die right now on the ground, we would probably just put a wet floor sign, the police would take them away, we'd continue being open in an hour, and we would make the exact same amount of money before they had died. We're so busy here with such a high turnover rate, their life is meaningless to Redacted Theater. I do not recommend saying that if you wish to keep your job.
I mean, it's kind of the truth of corporatism, at least in my opinion, that eventually corporations get so big that they're more beholden to the shareholders than they are to the customers.
I believe the exact line from Civilization 5 was, "Corporation, an ingenious invention that allows individual profit without individual responsibility."
But on a less serious note,
I was not serious, for the record. I need that on the podcast. Do not tell your customers that if they died, it would not affect your bottom line sales, no matter how true it may be.
Shield your customers from the truth.
Or your guests, depending on how classic your stories.
Ooh, yeah, that's true. A lot of classier restaurants and Redacted movie theaters have guests rather than patrons.
Although no one ever calls them patrons, which is a fantastic way to go about it. That's like Tiny Tavern, and I respect it.
But we were going to talk about the #NotSpawn Netflix series Final Space.
Yes, let's move into tonight's topic. So I'm going to start with my thoughts on Final Space. And warning, there will be spoilers for a show, including the fact that it was canceled without any resolution whatsoever.
Ooh. Yeah.
So if you haven't watched Final Space and watched this podcast episode, I will be spoiling it for you, and I'm fine with that. I am not going to lose any sleep over this. You have been warned. You might have to binge listen to it. And at least it's not Doctor Who, where you have to listen for 7 days and 7 nights before you can enjoy this podcast. But it's hard to discuss this show without explicit spoilers because of how vital they are to the structure.
Right.
All right, let's begin. So, let's go with... Let's try and alternate, because last time I'm describe this plot of Bleach, and I kept interrupting. So I think each of us will kind of bounce back and forth telling the story. So I'll open, and then once I finish my 2 sentences, you get 2 sentences.
2 sentences, okay.
All right.
I like this rule.
Final Space has the beautiful framing device where Gary Goodspeed is running out of oxygen floating in the void. After being told he has X number of minutes before he runs out of air, the intro credits begin, and we transition to the opening scene of
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I don't remember the first season all that well, except that he knocks out a federal agent for the space agency and takes his suit, and then using the disguise, he gets into a Space Federation bar, I believe.
Following entering the bar, a series of explosions and failures happen in truly beautiful cataclysmic catastrophe, and he ends up actually being busted for his crimes and having to serve just by himself and his best friend Kevin doing space maintenance on the Galaxy 1 ship.
Was that technically one sentence, or was that two?
I'm gonna say it was two.
I mean, it was kind of a lengthy one. Anyway, regardless, so Gary is kind of a super creep because the only thing that gets him through his sentence is his hypothetical relationship with another Space Federation officer, whom he creates a video diary talking about how much he loves her, and it's just they take it off as sweet, but he's definitely super creepy.
So, to follow up on that with my two sentences, I only really need to use this first sentence to set up the next 5 words, which will describe Gary perfectly. He is the worst protagonist.
He definitely seems to be bad at everything he does. But he does have one thing on his side, and that is incredible luck and questionable physics.
But disregarding incredible luck and questionable physics, a cornerstone of sci-fi, he also has Mooncake, the best protagonist in anything, which allow the two to cancel each other out and make a mostly good show.
But so where I was kind of going with the incredible luck and crazy questionable physics, less so about the physics at this point, and more so about the fact that the space officer Quinn, whom he is in love with, goes rogue and ends up rescuing him from his prison, I believe. That's how the story's set up?
I know part of it is the ship's AI Hugh, another one of the best characters ever written, which is the duality of the show, is they have 3 or 4 characters that, if were given their own show, would be a grossly superior show. But then they put Gary in it. But yes, I believe first he rescues Mooncake, who is a beautifully pure, adorable green alien who goes chickadee-pa, and you would die for this thing. Doesn't really matter who you are. You would become loyal to it and die for it. Not because of evil manipulation, but it's just that pure.
But in rescuing Mooncake, he angers the Supreme Commander.
Yes.
Who is trying to open a rift to final space. Mooncake is the key to final space, it seems.
So, using that beautifully described framing device before, we get, for the first season, 10 episodes are the 10 minutes of air as he's having a slowly dying and letting the sort of series play out through him. You meet a few more characters, you get some action, you get some really well thought out sci-fi, and then some BoJack Horseman level crude jokes.
It is definitely BoJack Horseman humor has its place, but the juxtaposition of some of these jokes, they end up, in my opinion, sometimes falling flat because of the setting. And it's
So,
I don't know.
Now that we've recapped it and we're now free to talk without counting sentences, and I really hope some of our viewers, or listeners? Yeah, listeners, had a little score pad to figure out how many more sentences I said than Carl so they can put hateful comments about it. Because I want to see those hateful comments desperately, calling me a tyrant who uses more than his allotted lines. So, the first season had that beautiful framing device, and they tried to tell a really good standalone sci-fi story. The basic premise being that He was basically they explored the idea of this time loop, where at the end of it, Gary always dies in his efforts to save Quinn and save the Earth from being destroyed by final space. At the very end of it, he made the decision to sacrifice himself instead, despite being the worst. And even his motivations for this sucked, because he lovingly sacrificed himself for a total stranger he was creeping on. And then you go through the idea that the season was him being the one time loop where he succeeds, because he wasn't the one that died. Instead, Quinn dies in this one loop, stopping him from being an infinite loop of dying. Which was a beautiful single season of TV that ends with a beam of light rescuing him. Then... go ahead.
Well, okay. Does it actually break the time loop? Like, I guess they don't really resolve the idea. So like, there's no concrete answer to that, I suppose. But
well, I guess season 3 does kind of concrete answer the time loop thing. Except that season 3 ends on a plot twist. Don't you remember in season 3 where every time loop that Gary died in, the main villain managed to make an army of Gary corpses?
Yeah, that's true.
Because it was a time loop that kept going until at Final Space, every single timeline ends in Final Space, and then Final Space like exploded, and then Satan was freed, and then the show ended. Which, if that was deliberate, would have kind of been amazing, but it wasn't.
they clearly sequel hooked that, like the live action Golden Compass or Alita Battle Angel.
You know what hurts about the
sequels
live action
we'll never
Golden
see.
Compass, which is not our topic of today's episode, but I need to say it, is they had one awesome scene of polar bear on polar bear violence and an incredible
Final Space definitely has more redeeming qualities than the movie Golden Compass.
Does it? Like, the problem with Final Space, and I can't stress this enough, is they forced themselves to make a Family Guy-esque comedy with the same Family Guy-esque animation style, and then it's like they had two people writing it, Seth MacFarlane, and somehow, despite all logic, they also managed to get H.G. Wells on board. Where, like, the Eldritch Horror, Space God, time travel plot arc was really well constructed for a show that took 10 minutes to have a pissing contest and everyone get UTI infections. That wasn't like a breach of term, because that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely... Now, I mean, okay, so when I say questionable physics, though, like, aside from this story being, like, having these, like, crude jokes that really undercut the emotional impact of what is just ostensibly a tragedy they were writing.
It really was. It was a good one.
It's like... falling does not hurt the main characters. Falling hurts side characters, but it does not hurt the main characters. It's like they don't have bones or something, but then, like, one scene in particular, they try to rescue this bug man so that he can go to his wedding, and then they accidentally knock him off the ship, and then he splats on the ground in front of everybody at the altar, and it's like,
Yeah, I like to give this...
That was not a well-thought joke. It's just...
Well, what's interesting is I like to give this speech to other classmates and students and what have you about levels of narrative precision. Where the moment you have something happen and you declare the rules and have someone explain it, you lose the ability to hand-wave it away from dramatic effect. So when Gary Luke gets his arm ripped off and a robot arm soldered on and hooks up the paint nerves to have his cool robot arm, you've now established that people break and bleed, so you can have this awesome arm scene. But then when you have this free fall from space and land and just dust himself off, you showed us that he's mortal. You can't now just, like, retcon this into a gag, because you specifically took the time to show us, yeah, no, he has an arm and it got ripped off.
Yeah, I mean... I mean, I would say I really did enjoy the first season of Final Space.
That framing device was just so good.
But it's just then, instead of ending their tragedy there, they decided to bring in time travel.
Travel was already there.
Yeah, but they brought it in to a much more focal point, which then the levels of narrative precision, how their time travel is just so like wonky.
Yep. And they also
because,
resurrected a fan favorite character, completely undercutting their emotional death. But what's funny is a friend of mine predicted that by being like, we never saw a body, of course he was going to survive. Which is amusing because when they're like, oh yeah, we traveled back in time and got him, it didn't actually interrupt the graphics, unlike Muaflaga's severed head floating in space and him showing up in the next season.
Well, okay, so like they did something really, really clever where it's like there's a certain scene, the first scene where Gary wears the skin suit and then he comes across the kids of the person whose skin he's wearing.
I hated that scene the first time so much.
And then they play through it. They play through it again, and it's like, oh yeah, I mean, through time travel, he actually caused some of the events that caused this tragic, like, recurring joke about the family and the kids and whatever. But it's like that handling of time travel actually seemed pretty clever to me. But then they had weird things where Night Hawk or whatever her name was. Future Quinn.
Nightwing. No, that's
Nightwing.
a DC character.
No, yeah. Anyway, Future Quinn was somehow in Final Space to be able to tell the people on the previous Earth to like build the Kevin net or to like keep a spare ship but it's like, but there's no timeline where that happened.
And the thing is for time travel, and I love bringing this up because it's just so funny to me. So, most time, writing time travel, you're almost guaranteed to mess it up your story. Like, very few things, fewer than 4 that I've seen in my life, do time travel well.
Hashtag Endgame.
Hashtag Endgame. Endgame fucked it up terribly. That was my one F-bomb.
right at the end. How did Captain America? What? It was so good right until the end.
They had it. They had it.
Anyways, go on.
Where the Dragon Ball Z method of our time travel doesn't actually do anything because you're going into a parallel timeline, and because you create a timeline, nothing you do when you time travel will change your future, but you will create a new timeline where your changes mattered. So the protagonist of the beautifully thought out sci-fi time travel series Dragon Ball Z: The Cell Saga effectively had to go, and what he learned improved him, and he had to go fix his future, but it wasn't magically fixed retroactively through time travel. He still had a dystopia. He just learned the tools he needed to turn it from a dystopia to utopia. He didn't quite get to utopia, but he went from dystopia to utopia.
He went from dystopia to topia back to dystopia.
And I don't consider anything other than specifically the Dragon Ball Z Cell Saga to be a sci-fi time travel masterpiece. The rest of Dragon Ball does not count.
Yeah, that's true. The Cell Saga is just...
And, like, for example, the series Steins Gate handled it in time travel really well, but they had to work really hard. Like, that was their entire point, was this was about time travel.
Right.
And other than... No, I think they nailed it. I think I could not find a flaw, which I actively hunt these things. Because their logic was whenever you change the timeline, because changing the timeline means you never changed it, everyone forgets you changed it, except the one main character's ability of knowing the timeline changes, that he only developed because he traveled through timelines so often that it mutated his brain.
Yeah, Steins Gate definitely handled time travel, like, super excellently. I mean,
although they did make a logistics claim that if you send someone's mother a text that they should eat more vegetables, they'll change the gender of the child. But at the same time, they're exploring the concept of transgender in an anime with a surprisingly enlightened stance on it for it being an anime.
Right.
Where they're like, they like explored both aspects of, hey, we can use this as a narrative device to see what someone would be like transitioned without the social pressure of actually writing a transition scene, because we can use time travel to explore it, and then let them have the memories of having lived both these lives and then decide for themselves which one they wanted. It was a very interesting, like, moving on from Steins Gate, because when anime flies too close to the sun, it often explodes. Back to Final Space, the time travel, they almost had it a few times. Especially with the premise that every timeline leads to Final Space, which was effectively a dumping ground for all, basically no matter what timeline you have, you end up at the apocalypse.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
But the problem go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I didn't actually have the real statement.
So for Season 2 of Final Space, they ended it with this casual sequel hook because that framing device of I'm running out of air, my last thoughts going through my brain, I go through my adventure. And weirdly, the tone of Season 1 Final Space started with Gary being the absolute worst. Literally the worst. Like, Sterling Archer is a better person. Yeah. So, you go through and you're like, yeah, this guy's a creeper, he's the worst. And then his love story somehow works out, and I'll get back to that later. But you kind of watch the tone get more and more somber, where you watch Gary go from dorky action hero living a sci-fi fantasy to, oh no, things are actually real, and I guess I have to be an actualized person. And I made a couple of actual meaningful friendships, and I adopted Little Kato and Avocado. Oh, Little Kato and Avocado were too cool for that show. And then you go through this pretty good self-contained story. And then Season 2 added a bunch of new characters that were clearly not developed from the start, which kind of messed with me.
Yeah, that's true. And then one of the strangest things that I felt like they did were some of their like side story episodes, Little Kato gets trapped in some sort of like temporal rift or whatever. And then so we like watch this whole episode of that's basically him going crazy and getting over the death of his father, who is then resurrected like 2 episodes later.
It's so weird. It's like they had 2 writers. One was really good and one was really bad. And they were battling at war.
You know, you and I have been chatting about your book ideas and stuff, and I'd like to comment on style. And Final Space had some really, really great ideas, but had no sense of consistent style, and ended up being a pretty meh tragedy when it could have been a super excellent one.
And the thing is, you can have comedy and tragedy. I actually find the 2 help build each other fantastically well. Like, to take my textbook example of good writing, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, they have lighthearted moments, because you need the levity to make the tragedy hit home. Because if it's just tragedy on tragedy on tragedy, you get the poor case of Reiner Lute, where you want to love this protagonist, but life just keeps beating him, and it doesn't actually stop over the runtime of the show. Where, like, I'm helping a colleague of mine work on a new draft of their book, and they had a scene in their book which I refer to as the werewolf castration scene. And the entire book up to this point would probably have like a PG-13 rating point. And then a werewolf gets castrated. And there's nothing wrong with putting werewolf castration in your book. Game of Thrones did it, and they made, what, $16 billion?
Yeah.
But if your book up to that point has no castrations in it, you just get confused. Because it won't really have the impact if it doesn't match the tone. And for Final Space, where Gary gets trapped in a Lazarus trap where his obsession with never getting a cookie comes to life to attack him, didn't actually, like, break the immersion, but the chain of events with him wearing the alien's skin while trying to get a passport was so much incompetence of the character that no other character should have been able to listen to anything Gary said for the rest of the show and give him any credibility whatsoever, because it had been proven to be so truly, profoundly, epically, beyond all deniability, incompetent.
Gary is the epitome of, or the opposite of, a Gary Stew. Like, I don't know
No, he's
if
the
there's a phrase
perfect
for
Gary
that.
Stu, because he had no reason to be good at anything. Because he had no training, no natural talent, no skills, no wisdom, no intelligence, and no charisma. Yet he pilots the spaceship, wins the sword fight, wins the laser shootout, escapes the logic trap, gets the girl, and saves the universe with literally no talents. He is the peak
I
Gary
suppose.
Stu. He might be the trope name. Because there's no reason Gary should have... Like, there's a bit where Quinn's like, we need to listen to Gary. I'm like, you have 3 degrees in astrophysics and are a general. What possible
and
thing
he's a
could this Gary
convicted
Stu
felon.
say, other than being male, that could possibly make anyone listen to him over you? Like, there's a scene where Avocado's like, nah, I'm not going to listen to Quinn. I need to go with Gary because he's my bro. It's like, that's the most white privileged thing I've ever seen. Is this person has 7 degrees, is a black belt in Muay Thai, and you're listening to Gary Goodspeed, the convicted convict, borderline internet predator, who has literally done nothing to help anyone in this entire show, who once put underwear on Mooncake's face to hide him from an AI. Like, there is no reason anyone should ever have, like, talked to Gary. Like...
Well, except for
Worst
Kevin.
protagonist I've ever seen, yet somehow got to be the main character. People are like, yeah, Gary's legit. I would die for him.
Kevin is...
Kevin did nothing.
I don't know. I really found him to be like... It's like they were a pair, Kevin and Gary, and I feel like Kevin annoyed me so much.
Well, what's interesting about Kevin, the joke they were going for was Kevin was the emotional support robot that was just the worst. And I get the joke. And the scene where he has 6 seconds before he dies, and the ship's about to explode, and he stops, turns around, drop kicks Kevin, and continues, was fantastic if Gary wasn't as bad as Kevin. So if we replace Gary with Geralt of Riviera somehow, where we have like an actual badass space mercenary pirate stuck for a crime he didn't commit on a prison ship, paired with Kevin would work great, because Kevin's an annoying stupid idiot that you're stuck with because the law court mandated it, and you're a badass. That's a common, fantastic duo trope. But because they were both idiots, it didn't work.
Well,
Because some characters
I would
you're
definitely
supposed to hate. You're supposed to hate Kevin. And as for that goal, it was successful.
Fair enough. I would definitely say the takeaway from this episode would be that Final Space is a show that's worth watching because there's some cool ideas that it explores, but you should definitely take some of those ideas with a grain of salt, and maybe it's something you can incorporate into your own creative fiction, but like it's also an example of how things can go wrong. So it's like I did enjoy it enough to watch all the way to the end.
Look, I gave it a couple
where it got
of
abruptly canceled.
So I gave season 1 of Final Space 3 watches. Because whenever something has time travel, I have to watch it twice. First watch is for enjoyment, and I'm probably multitasking. Like, I'm probably like Mario making or Pokemon snapping, while Final Space plays in the background as I passively absorb it. The second time, I watch it looking for Easter eggs, hidden tricks, actually paying attention. And the third time is, if they mention time travel, I'm specifically looking for whether or not you actually foreshadowed a plot twist. Like, I literally am taking a class next semester called Reading Like a Writer, which is about, like, analyzing the narrative structure of things. And the thing about Final Space is the plot, mapping out your plot, the plot was fascinating and really good. The characters and settings, where they're like, were actually like a really solid animated sci-fi show. But the sci-fi was so much better than the comedy, but got less screen time. It was just a fascinating tire fire. But I am going to follow up with the read with a grain of salt. I'm also going to say, a lot of times on this podcast, and we're going to have a real special moment here. Okay. A lot of times on this podcast, I will give angry rants about works of fiction. That's probably what I do. Like, my official job title is Angry Rant Task Force Member. But you gotta remember, that when you're judging a work of fiction across every work of fiction ever made, you hold things up to an impossible standard that could implode. For Final Space, if you compare it to Futurama, you'll be like, well, Futurama had better jokes and better episodic structure, but Final Space had a much better overarching plotline. So Final Space, when compared to things in a genre, is weird because it doesn't quite fit into either. When compared as an animated comedy, and you compare it to every animated comedy ever made, it takes some damage, it gets hurt, it's easy to give a bad review. When you compare its sci-fi comments to every sci-fi show ever made, honestly, it's probably like in 7th. Like, it has some really good ideas in there. But that's what we need to do is, even though I give impassioned speeches about things, that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy them. I enjoyed Final Space. I can safely say, if you go into Final Space, knowing that the jokes are dumb, but trying to look between the lines and see what's good in it, you can give yourself a good time.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like both of us have watched it all the way to the end, and like you said, you watched at least the first season like 3 times to see what kind of time travel shenanigans there were. But in the end, the more you like something, the harsher you criticize it. But that harsh criticism does sometimes bring to light legitimate errors in continuity or just the flow of episodic structure and style.
And with that, remember, be kind to creators, be kind to your artists, be kind to your writers, because even though I will often say on this podcast, I could definitely do it better, if I could, I would have, and I'd already be a millionaire about it. If I could just make a better Final Space, I better be prepared to hand you it. And with that, let's move into our random question of the week. And remember, if your random question of the week makes it onto our podcast, which you can submit by commenting, signing up for our Patreon, posting on my Twitter, coming to my house, and leaving it in a black envelope on the doorstep, you can win your chance.
We won't open envelopes if they're not the right colors, though.
Oh, yeah. If it's a gray envelope that says danger, like I'm going to open it in a gray envelope.
Yeah, that's a real gray area there.
And with that, you can win your copy of the Waltz of Blades Deluxe, which is on sale at the moment. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you get a 15% off coupon. The newsletter link should be in the video description. But enough about my shameless self-promotion for me just wanting things like food and shelter. All right, a random question. What was the last time you changed your opinion about something major?
When was the last time I changed my opinion about something major? Well, I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, I have a story about a time that I very quickly changed my opinion about an interaction I had with a customer at work, kind of following up on the what's new with me. But about something major, probably when I just realized that I actually do like broccoli.
Huh. I can respect that. I can respect that immensely.
That was definitely several years ago, and I don't know if that's major enough for the question, but it's random, so there's a random answer.
Fair enough.
What's your answer there, Richard?
So, the thing is, I usually use like a circular logic stance where I will give a very impassioned speech, but I'm actually pretty flexible in my views for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And for something major, let's see. Like, my opinions of people, as you're aware, are more like a fluctuating point scale, so it's not like I'm going to change from, like, you're my best friend to my worst enemy overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Nor am I going to be like, I like orange today, I hate orange. But I'm going to let this count as major. For the first time in my life, I bought an umbrella. 3 weeks ago, about. So, in Alberta and Calgary, if it rained, I would just wear a raincoat, because that protects your entire body and you don't have to hold a stick above your head. And I would say for years, umbrellas are stupid, just wear a raincoat. But as a student with more gear and layers, I actually found that I needed the umbrella, because if I sat on the bus in a raincoat, it would soak through my pants because the water stays on the raincoat, where the umbrella I can just kind of dangle off the side of my backpack. So I'm going to say it's major enough that I am now pro umbrella.
Huh.
I see their value now. And, okay, our random dragon question of the week comes from one of our viewers. And where is it? Ah, wow, this is a amusing one. You're about to fight a dragon in a cave. You have $100. What did you bring with you for this battle?
$100?
Yeah, so before this battle, you spent $100 to prepare to fight a dragon in a cave.
To prepare to fight a dragon in a cave. Hmm. Oof. Now there's logistical questions. Because I mean, like, do dragons have dark vision? I've never looked into it, but like, you know, the lighting is kind of a huge thing. So it's like my first thought was I definitely spent some money on some flashbangs to be able to disorient this guy. But then it doesn't really work if he's in a well lit cave, or if he. Well, I mean, I guess it would work really well if he had dark vision. You might see it coming.
So I had a similar idea where I'm like, if I'm going on a budget, if I have some magnesium strips, like just like a roll of magnesium strips, and I just yeet it towards the fire and have my eyes closed in advance, his flame will make brighter than any flashbang you're going to get your money on. So my plan for my $100 is magnesium strips and as much gasoline, which probably would get me like a thermos, as I can afford to try and get him to explode. So I throw the magnesium strips, the light blinds him. With my skills that Fantasy Richard has, that real Richard does not, I get a cheap plastic thermos of gasoline thrown in his mouth. He swallows it, it hits the acid in his stomach, burns through it, and then he just explodes. And then he's really mad and kills me.
Oh
also,
man, then you
I
get
considered
into
crossbow, just up crossbow, but I don't know if I can get one for $200.
Probably not one powerful enough to shoot a dragon.
According to Amazon,
As a
the
random
cheapest crossbow I'm getting is $600, so I'm SOL.
Oof! Wow, that's more expensive than a 3D printer.
Oh man, we could just print crossbows. And with that, thank you everybody for tuning in to Deep Space and Dragons. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, download, tell your friends, put on the holiday TV, put on the regular day TV, and support us in any way you can, because I thrive on your attention.
Speaking of supporting us, if you've been following our YouTube channel for a while, we've been posting some of our Let's Plays. We've been playing a Japanese Gundam game for the Wii.
Which is
our regular stream date is probably changing soon to Wednesdays, but you can watch us play some games if you enjoy hearing our banter.
And if you're just sick of me and my ego, you can watch Karl stomp me into the floor. Thank you for tuning in and have a smiley night.
Bye.